And so this is what the sort of theme of my talk is, about coming at things from different directions and compartmentalising to a certain extent. When you were doing science at school, you sort of were taught, right, you've got to do an investigation, you know, you've got to you frame a question and then you design an experiment. And so you're testing things all the time, you're looking for evidence. With a religious method, in some ways it's faith. It's like, well, I don't need to test it, I believe it. You know, I believe that you can turn water into wine, as a Catholic. As a chemist, water is H2O. Wine is alcohol. You cannot turn water into wine. You can't do it. But how can I, as a Catholic, believe that you can? And if you can't turn water into wine, how can you turn wine into blood, you know, for the Eucharist? And so you've got immediately this real boundary between the two. And let's look at the origin of the universe and the origin of humanity from the scientific way. So you can ask a question. Right, where did the world come from? Where did the first person come from? Design an experiment to help answer that question. Test, you know, using the experiment, get some data, interpret the results, draw conclusions from the results. And then the most important thing is make predictions to test whether those conclusions are true. And that's cyclical. And so everything scientifically you advance bit by bit by bit. And so in terms of the origin of the universe, you've got all sorts of theories. Astronomers talk about the Big Bang. You can make predictions. You can talk about subatomic particles and the particle collider at CERN and stuff like that. And you can make predictions and you can test them. Then, in contrast then, the religious method. Ask the same question. Where did the world come from? How did the first person get here? And you're not making predictions, you're making up stories. So if you go back thousands of years, you know, people would look at the sky and say, where did the stars come from? How did they get there? And they'd make up stories about the patterns they saw in the stars, which is where we get the signs of the zodiac from and all that sort of stuff. So people made up stories to explain things, especially things like an eclipse of the sun. You know, these natural phenomena that happen, but people who, you know, 10,000 years ago didn't have the understanding to be able to explain it. But then people built Stonehenge, which can, you know, they lined it all up so that on the summer solstice, you know, the sunlight at dawn comes through and it strikes on that stone. And so they were aware of natural things. They might not have been able to understand them, but they were aware of them. And so stories were made up. And the stories that were made up were appropriate to the time and the place and the people. And so we might say, right, let's read Genesis. You know, let there be light, and there was light. And then God took Adam, and he took a rib from Adam, and he took clay, and he formed it, and he made woman a companion for Adam. And you might think, well, no way. You know, take some dust, make a man, take a rib from the man, make a woman. As sophisticated people in the 21st century, we know that you don't make a person like that. But in biblical times, you know, 4,000 years ago, they didn't understand. And so there was an explanation. This is where the world came from. This is where the water came from. This is why there's night and day. So you have the imagery appropriate to the time and the place. And then you get the mythology that grows around these. So this is case study number 1, the origin of the universe. This is the scientific explanation for how the universe originated. It originated in the Big Bang, all right, which was 13.7 billion years ago, 13.7 thousand million years ago. There was nothing. And then there was something. And there was nothing, and then particles formed. Not atoms, not even electrons, but things that they look for at CERN in the particle collider. We cannot understand this because we can't investigate it, all right? So we're now going forward in time from this Big Bang. Hydrogen was made, the gas that the stars made from. Then the galaxies, which are huge clusters of galaxies. Our galaxy is called the Milky Way. And there are 100,000 million stars in our galaxy. And there are 100,000 million galaxies in the universe. So, first of all, you've got the sun formed here. You've got all these zillions of galaxies, zillions of stars in the galaxies. Now, using very powerful telescopes, all telescopes do is they catch light. That's all telescopes do. They catch light to see. And looking back in time, this is about as far back as we can go, because the time taken for the speed of light to travel, you get to a certain point at which the light, which we're looking at now, so it takes 8 minutes for light to get from the sun to us. So when we look at the sun now, we're looking at how it was 8 minutes ago. You get me? So if we look at Proxima Centauri, Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star to us, if we look at that, it's taken 4 years for the light to get to us. So when we look at that particular star, we're looking at how it was 4 years ago. So the further back you go, the further away things are, the longer it takes the light to get to us. So we can only look back with the most powerful telescopes we've got. We can only look back to about here. And we can model, theoreticians model what they think must have happened here to produce what's happened here. But we have got no idea, dark ages, whoops, we have got no idea what happened here. And then this thing, the Big Bang, is theoretical, right? So that's a scientific explanation. I'll come back to that, a scientific explanation of how the universe formed. There was a massive explosion, and suddenly space and time started. Now, the origin of the universe, we tend to look at things from our Christian perspective, all right? There was God, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Different peoples, different religions have different creation myths. So here is the Romans, and what you had here was you had a whole load of different gods. You've got Titan, Atlas holding the world. You've got a whole mythology with the Olympian gods and the Titans before them, Kronos and Rhea, and you've got the story of, was it Kronos ate all the gods, but Rhea gave him stone instead of eating Jupiter, and so Jupiter survived then to lead the Olympian gods. Okay, so you've got that. This is the Norse god. This is Yggdrasil. We've got some. So this is Asgard, the world of. Does that say? I can't see it now. But so Yggdrasil. This is the tree of the gods. Okay, and you've got Loki, and you've got Odin, and Wotan, and all that lot. So you've got, this is the Norse mythology. So this is the Hindu creation myth. Okay. So these are different interpretations of how the world formed from different times, different places, different religions, different backgrounds. And they are as untestable as the Big Bang hypothesis is. Case study 2 is the origin of humanity, origin of people. All right, so we know that there's DNA in our cells, and the DNA is a very, very long, complicated molecule which is 2 strands of chemicals that are sort of woven to each other, and there's the Darwinian theory of evolution where you can start with a single-celled organism and, you know, go on up, and eventually you get to the great apes, and then this is a sort of later series of evolution where we've got the great apes that eventually walk upright. You have the hunters, then you have the hunter-gatherers, and then here we've got someone with a hammer action drill, and then we've got somebody who's hunched over their computer, so with a posture very similar to how they started off from. And one of the, I mean, this is a map of how you put all the genomes together, or how you put all the how you add or how you trace the history of all different organisms. And so there are three kingdoms. There's bacteria and archaea, these are single-celled organisms, and these are multi-celled organisms. And this is known as the tree of life. And so things all started off from something single here, and gradually evolved. And we've got here, we're animals up there, right at the end, on a branch that comes from plants and slime moulds. And the closer you are on these branches, the closer you are genetically. So we're actually very close to slime moulds. I believe we share 60% of the contents of our cells with a banana. All right, so something like that. So we're not, you know, we're evolved, but, you know, we're not that evolved. But this is the origin of humanity. It started off with a single cell, and it gradually evolved into humans. And the interesting thing is, how much further are we going to evolve? And that's something else. That's one of the things that I want us to be discussing. All right, and here's the, if you like, the creation myth. So here we've got, this is from the roof of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, very, very famous part of it. And look at this. Do you understand the significance of this? The navel.
How could we have had one?
Exactly, we've all got one. What's the navel? It's your navel, your belly button. All right, and so when you were in your mother's uterus, you were attached to her by the umbilical cord. And when you were born, the umbilical cord was cut, and when the little bit that shriveled away, that's your belly button. So the fact that you've got a navel, a belly button, means that you were actually inside somebody else's womb, right? How could Adam, the first man, have had a navel? All right. So we've got. I mean, this is, you know, just this is showing that, you know, God created Adam. But poor old Michelangelo, he didn't really know much about, you know, human biology.